Here we go again. Another violent attack on a train. Another crazy homeless man with a long violent history says violent firebug who set woman ablaze on Chicago train has long rap sheet and had no business being on the streets. I'd say that's an understatement. Okay. This guy, Lawrence Clark, the other day on the CTA, the Chicago, like train, I don't know if it's Chicago Transit Authority, whatever their train line is. This guy walks up to a woman, douses her in gasoline, and sets her on fire. Okay? And you can look the video up if you want to see it. It's out there just like, all the other horrible videos online. I've seen it. I mean, look at this guy. I mean, look at him. There's something wrong with him. You can tell, yes, I'm making a judgment call based on a photo. You can tell that person there has some type of mental impairment, okay? And here he is. He's walking down the subway or on the train. You see there's other people there. Nobody does anything, and then he just douses this woman with gasoline and sets her on fire. And this guy's got a long record of being violent. He's been arrested over 70 times, multiple felony convictions. He actually was currently on electronic monitoring. A Cook County judge let him out, didn't want to hold him in jail for his next trial. He had just recently assaulted a social worker at a psychiatric hospital. Like the guy's insane. He doesn't need to be on the streets. But again, American citizens were being held captive, by these crazy lunatics, and judges are letting them go. Here he is. This is from 2020. This is the same guy, Lawrence Reed. He tried to set the Thompson Center on fire after he didn't get his Social Security check. They got a video here of it. Here, we'll pull this video up. So look, he's poured out a bunch of gasoline here and set it on fire, trying to set the building on fire. Luckily, he was unsuccessful, but clearly this person is unstable. They don't need to be on the streets. And that's where we're at now as a society. And you have to ask yourself, are they trying to make it so bad that we demand like an authoritarian police state? That's what I'm always like. It's hard to tell. Like, is there a conspiracy? Is it just we're a lost society at this point? Like we're so far off track. It's suicidal empathy, because all these people, all these bleeding hearts, they're like, oh well, they're homeless. We've got a pretty bad homeless problem here in Louisville, and a lot of the people justify it when I complain about the homeless population or why I don't want homeless people around. The argument they come at me with is, a lot of these people have mental illness. I know that. That's why I don't want them around. I don't want a lot of mentally ill people walking around while my wife wants to take a walk in the neighborhood, while my son wants to play outside. Here we go. This was the Irina Zaruska girl in Charlotte. Do you remember this? This was just a couple months ago. Same deal. Look at her. Ukrainian refugee, came over here to try to have a better life, and she got attacked by this guy, stabbed her, another psycho with a long rap sheet that shouldn't have been out. It's frustrating to think that, if I lived in Charlotte, I would want my family to be able to travel on the, on the public train system and not have to worry about being attacked by some criminally insane man. But that's just not the case. This guy up in Chicago, the mayor said that this was an isolated incident because 1 million people travel on their train system every day and nothing happens. Well, I pulled up just some quick stats, and I'm not big on stats because I know they can be manipulated. But for the fiscal year, last year, there was 2,893 reported crimes on the CTA system. Approximately 300 of those crimes were violent. Okay, so if he thinks isolated incident means more than a crime a day being committed on the train system, that doesn't sound isolated to me. The city of Chicago itself had 28,443 violent crimes last year. And you look it all up, and it just, a lot of the numbers for this year said violent crime is down 20% in Chicago. Well, if it's down 20% from 28,000, that's not really that great. But again, it's all about how they report it, right? That's, again, why I don't really care about statistics. But we continue to tolerate this, and the judges and the court systems continue to fail the taxpayer over and over again. You know, the taxpayer, we're paying billions of dollars every year for programs for mentally ill people, for homeless people, and then we're turned around and held captive in our own society to where we can't feel safe to walk around because there's just lunatics walking around every year. Violent lunatics, proven violent lunatics. And I understand it. I don't know what the answer is. You know, I know the prison system is overwhelmed. I definitely think there needs to be some form of prison reform. I don't think violent offenders should ever be released from prison. Like, I'm not talking about a guy that gets in a bar fight once or twice. You know, people need to be able to use some good decision making when it comes to what I'm talking about. But if you're a rapist, if you're a murderer, if you molest children, you should be locked up for the rest of your life. No parole, no comfy lifestyle. And I know people are like, well, prison's not really. I get that. I'm not saying that prison is comfortable, but it should be a lot less comfortable than it is. And there should be no chance of parole for people that do seriously violent crimes. There should be like two prison systems, basically. One for people that it's like, okay, we're locking you up, throwing away the key, and then another prison system for people that are minor violent crimes, white collar crimes, things like that. And I know I don't believe in the death penalty. I get in a huge debate with people about that all the time. I don't think we should give the government the authority to decide who gets to live and die. We've seen too many times over where people have been wrongfully convicted, and decades later, there's evidence to overturn that, and we're able to get them out. So I don't think and plus, I changed my whole opinion on the death penalty. I read an article. It was either in one of Ron Paul's books or an article he had written, but Ron Paul made the case that would be a great way for an authoritarian government to get rid of any of its critics. You know, they could basically create some sort of crime or set you up, frame you to make it look like you've done something, or an enemy of the state, or deem you as a domestic terrorist and potentially put you to death. So it was at that point that I changed my stance on the death penalty, because when I was younger, I used to advocate for the death penalty for violent criminals. I've changed my stance on that. But I do believe in long-term detention for them forever, not letting them out. You know, we had another guy here, Kane Madden. This goes back to 2019. But this guy, Kane Madden, he was in and out of homeless shelters downtown and had mental illness. Well, you know, we kept enabling his lifestyle, kept him around, and he went to a home in a predominantly black neighborhood. And see, it's a white guy, so see, it's not a racial thing. I've seen a lot of people online talking about these attacks on the trains, making it out to be a white versus black thing. Crazy does not discriminate, okay? Kane Madden went in this backyard and hit a little girl with a shovel and fractured her skull and then raped her. This guy should not have been out. He's crazy. Lock him up in a mental institution. And again, I know we go back to how it used to be in the 50s and 60s. You had these mental institutions and the doctors were doing horrible experiments to people, some of them by the government. If you want to learn about some interesting things on that, you should read Poisoner in Chief by Stephen Kinzer. Does a really good job documenting Sidney Gottlieb and the experiments that they were doing during MK Ultra. Really creepy stuff. Some of the darkest things our government has ever done, and supposedly they don't do them anymore. I don't believe that. I think it's concealed in other ways now. But I understand the argument against involuntary detaining crazy people because, again, who gets to determine who's crazy? If we give the government the authority to do that, you could potentially see in the future anybody that doesn't believe in, let's just say you're a capitalist and you have a radical Marxist authoritarian regime, and they say that anybody that believes in free markets and capitalism is crazy and that you need to be re-educated or put into some type of center because you can't adapt to the new communist system of government. I'm just playing that argument there. Or do it the other way around. Let's say it's a crazy, fascist corporate government that took control, and you have to submit to the corporations, but you don't want to agree with that. And anybody that doesn't want to be part of the corporation, well, you must be crazy. And then they want to lock you up. So there's all sorts of different roles you could play. But at the end of the day, you have to think of the civil liberties, and you have to think of the authoritarian implications of giving the government that authority. But we got to do something. We have to get the crazy people off the streets. We're living in an open air mental asylum. It's crazy. And the worst part is people are defending this. Like I said, you can argue with these people. It's suicidal empathy. I'm telling you, I think it was Elon Musk I first heard use that term. Might have been on a Joe Rogan podcast. I don't know. But I completely agree. It's suicidal empathy. And you see it not just with wanting to protect and keep mentally ill people walking the streets, but you see it with the social welfare programs. The reason we're $38 trillion in debt. People just want to keep spending money. We're going off the fiscal cliff. We're potentially looking at some form of economic collapse over the next decade, maybe sooner, maybe a little bit longer. We don't know when, but we don't know if, but we know it's when. And people just refuse. They don't want to cut. They don't want to change any of the spending. You see it with wanting to intervene in foreign countries. Keep spending that military money because we have to have this global empire because we need to be the police of the world. Here's another incident in Kentucky. Logan Tipton, the 6-year-old little boy, he had this crazy guy, Ronald DeSantis. Now, he wasn't homeless. He was crazy. This was a really strange one. I don't believe this guy had a criminal record. Awesome. The computer froze up on me. But so Ronald DeSantis was a guy, I think he was a X-ray tech or some type of hospital employee that lived in either Indianapolis or Cincinnati, didn't live in Kentucky. One night just gets in his car, drives down to this town near Lexington, Kentucky, breaks into this home, and murders a 6-year-old little boy, stabs him multiple times, then attacks his sister. The dad was able to wrestle him away. The guy goes to jail. And then just recently, they let him out. This crazy guy stabs a 6-year-old boy multiple times, destroys this family. Just absolutely destroys this family. And when they let him out, he went down to Florida, failed to register as a convicted felon, and then he basically violated his probation immediately. Now he's come back to Kentucky, and supposedly now they're going to take away his parole, and he's going to finish out his sentence, so do another 10 years and then get out. Don't let him out at all. The man's insane. He's already killed somebody's 6-year-old boy. So what are you going to do? Let him out of jail, and then he goes and destroys another family? And these are just some of the cases. I mean, you can see it all the time. There was another young woman, and I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. There he is. This is the guy, Ronald Exantis, ordered to stay in prison now for how long? You know, how long till he gets paroled again? I can see it in a few years. There'll be some type of compassionate plea to let him out, and he'll get out again. And then the family's going to go through the same thing. And then, I have to listen to my family and their concerns. I'm a father, I'm a husband, and my wife sees this stuff and she's concerned about it, and I have to acquiesce her fears. Like it's just ridiculous what they want us to put up with. And that's what I mean. I don't know if there's some conspiracy behind it, or if it's just we've lost our way. But something's got to change. And it starts with, I'm not big on this Republican Democrat. Sure, it's a charade basically, because they're both really the uniparty at the top on things that matter. But at the local level, at least where I am in Louisville, there's a pretty clear divide between the party of law and order and the party of, just suicidal empathy and being overly compassionate. And it's the Democrats here. They're just, I don't know if the having too much empathy in itself is a form of mental illness, but if it is, there's a lot of mentally ill people in Louisville. They want to make justifications for everybody. They want to make excuses for everybody. Everybody gets a second chance. Most people in America get way more than second chances. They get third, fourth, fifth chances. Lawrence Reed, the guy that just set that woman on fire in Chicago, he's had 70-something chances. Okay, but at some point, you got to stop tolerating this stuff. Again, I don't know what to do, but you got to do something, because what we're doing right now is not working. We're wasting a lot of resources on people that aren't worth it. People say, all lives matter, black lives matter, white lives. Who cares? Not all lives matter, okay? When you contribute nothing and you do nothing and you're worth nothing, then no, you don't really matter. And all you do is make things harder for the people that do produce, for the people that do create, for the people that do work, for the people that do earn. And it's those people that are suffering because we're too busy worried about catering to people that provide no value to society. It's crazy.